You're listening to Juicy Radio. I'm your host, Tony Bacigalupo, and in this episode, we're going to talk to my awesome friend, Ashley Proctor, who, among many other things, is running Juicy Canada, which takes place in Montreal on October 5th through 7th. Tickets are available now at canada.juicy.co. If you're interested in joining, I recommend you grab tickets as soon as you can. The prices do go up, so make sure you check it out, canada.gcuc.co. I will be there. A bunch of awesome other folks will be speaking at the event. And last year's Juicy Canada Conference was just such an amazing group of people. There's just something about the way Ashley puts it together, the kinds of folks that come together up there in Canada. And Montreal's just an awesome place to visit. But enough about that. Let's get to talking about our guest, Ashley Proctor. Ashley manages co-working spaces and artist studios in 3 different cities, in Toronto, Seattle, and in Vancouver, where she's working on a really ambitious project that I'm actually helping her out with. And she has just a ton of experience building really great, authentic, long-lasting, and amazing communities, not just with co-working, but with artists and with different kinds of creative formats. And so it's really fun to talk to Ashley about co-working because she comes at it from a perspective that isn't just about workspace, but it's really about creative people and the way that they come together. Ashley also runs, we didn't get to talk about this in the interview, but Ashley runs a thing called COHIP, which is a national health insurance program for members of Canadian co-working spaces. So you could find out about that at cohip.ca. She also has extensive experience running co-working alliances, running a few in Toronto, Ontario, and in Seattle, and working on that in Vancouver as well. So she's prolific. She's involved in co-working in so many different angles, and we'll explore a few of those things in this conversation. And so without further ado, let's get into the conversation with Ashley Proctor in this Juicy Radio, episode 5. So Ashley, tell me a little bit about your story, how you sort of came to know this world of co-working and what made you decide that you ultimately wanted to get involved and dedicate yourself to it in the way that you have.
Wow. Well, I guess a lot of what originally got me interested, it came out of an experience I had at the Ontario College of Art and Design, and a bunch of my friends and peers we're looking for somewhere to work on campus together. We like to hang out and get work done together with our sketchbooks or bounce ideas off of each other. And we would usually gather at someone's house or in the park and just work on our own stuff, but together. And one of the projects that I undertook at the Ontario College of Art and Design was building a collaborative space called X Space, which was a gallery and an event space and a shared workspace and a retail store, and we held events and workshops, and it was a little bit of everything. But what I realize now is that it was mostly a community, and that while we were attending school as students, we had this great supportive community around us of people who sort of understood how we saw the world and were interested in the same things that we were. And when you leave school, you sort of lose that. And I thought it was really important, especially as most of us were self-employed and starting out on our own, that we still have that support system and that we try and provide a safe and welcoming and creative and inspiring environment to work in and to support each other. So I think I fell into co-working pretty naturally, just trying to solve a problem for myself and my friends through the Ontario College of Art and Design first and foremost, but then eventually on my own and recreated many times over the years.
And so X Space was a project, a college project, as part of a course or something?
No, X Space was actually an initiative that the students decided they wanted to sort of support and fund. So it's the first student-funded, student-run gallery, event, collaborative workspace. And it was put together by a few generations of the student union and the students themselves at OCAD. And so that project was always intended to be by and for the students. And I think I've kept that model very similar over the years, keeping the spaces mostly by and for the members.
Wow, that's really impressive. And it seems like the kind of culture that you experienced in your university is perhaps not all that unlike what other similar people might experience in their own university experiences, but there was something that seemed to be a little bit extra special here, where you saw an opportunity, maybe through this initiative, to take the kind of communal feeling you had in college and actually continue it after college. There was this desire not to give that up and for everyone to just kind of disperse. And you were in Toronto, the school's in Toronto, and you stayed on living in Toronto after the fact. And so there was this additional benefit of, school wasn't this far away place that you're never coming back to. It's where you wanted to stay too. Is that a sentiment that other people had as well?
Well, I feel like for me, Toronto was somewhere I wanted to stay because I had that community after school. And I might have, gone back to my small hometown, or I may have moved to another city had I not found my peers and friends through co-working. And I think it's really important. We see that in almost every co-working community I visited. It's really the people that keep you there. I think that's really important.
Well, now that speaks to another interesting idea, which is the extent to which having a community like this to belong to actually can influence where you decide to live. A lot of cities right now are trying to solve the issue of brain drain, and even university cities, college towns where they graduate really talented people, and then those people head out for where the job opportunities are. But now we're seeing, of course, more and more people can work from anywhere, and, work opportunities aren't the same as what they used to be. So maybe there's a way that cities can attract and retain talented folks in different ways now. And maybe there's a model that they can look at with these kinds of communities.
Absolutely. I think that's entirely true. I grew up in a really small town, and although a lot of the resources in terms of work and some of the cultural events and different networks that I needed to tap into for my career weren't available in that setting, I still really appreciated that everyone knew each other and supported each other. People looked out for each other and took care of each other, and they ended up working with each other and helping each other out. And I feel like I gravitated towards a small community like that within a giant city like Toronto. And then within that community, we built an even closer community of people who were like-minded and wanted to support each other. And again, we're sharing the same type of resources, whether they be personal or professional support. And I'm finding that definitely is what keeps you engaged in your city, whether it's your hometown or not. And as I'm moving sort of across the country and around the world, I'm finding the need to establish myself in other cities. And the first place I would turn to would be a thriving co-working environment where it's a really diverse group of people who care enough to want to be together and to share and help each other out. And that's exactly the starting point when you're in a new city.
What does it look like in real life terms, maybe for somebody who's never been to a co-working space before and maybe doesn't understand, or even has been a part of a co-working space, but maybe hasn't really experienced what's possible in one where that culture's really humming?
Yeah, I think it's something that definitely grows with time. That opportunity also grows with the amount of effort and energy you put into it. So what you put in is what you get out of co-working. And so if you show up and really engage with the people in your space and are open to new conversations and new possibilities, then the opportunity is pretty large for you there.
What else can you do to facilitate that humanity, that humanness that you're saying, that we're seeing, that we need, people need more of? How can you facilitate that more if you're managing a space like that?
I think the number one way is simply caring about the members in the space, getting to know them, learning their names, learning their interests, and sort of participating day to day, whether that be directly or through your community animation team, or I think there's ways that you can just directly engage with your members. And when you're engaged with your members, you're hearing feedback from them all the time, whether it's verbal or if it's just implied. If you're tuned in, you're aware of sort of the needs in the space and in the community, and you can see how your space, the design, or the events or the amenities would shift based on who's using the space and what they need at any given time. And those shifts can happen seasonally. Those shifts could happen directly related to something happening in the city itself or your physical location. But I think the important thing is to be tuned into those members and really treat that as the driving force of what comes next for your space and for your community.
Okay, so you're talking about that there are these kind of generational shifts that happen, seasonal shifts that happen, and so people are kind of constantly coming and going, and they're going through their own life experiences, right? Their lives are changing, their professional work is changing, their personal lives, and so aligning what you do around that, or being at least sensitive to that and aware of that in the way that people behave and they come and go is sort of a piece of that as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really important part. I think a lot of people, if they are building community or trying to build a space, are thinking a lot about their own experience and what would be helpful for them if they were in the space. But what would be most helpful for me isn't necessarily what would be most helpful for my members. So I'm always trying to build a space that meets their needs, to create an environment that allows them to be flexible rather than, building a space that's really enjoyable for me personally to work in.
And now you also work with not just co-working spaces, but you also manage artist studios. And I always thought that was just such an awesome sort of confluence of creative folks, and artist studios have been around for forever. And so that's not a particularly new thing, but have you noticed any interesting interactions or observations there?
There's so much similarity. I'm just surprised there's not more crossover between the operators or the industry. My background is as an artist and an entrepreneur, and so I've been part of both communities and deeply involved in both, and I seem to be able to see this happening with both groups at the same time. So I sort of have this vision of both of them side by side, and I had always kept them at different locations thinking that they needed slightly different things. But after having our two communities together at events, I realized that they were having the same conversations, they were interested in the same type of topics, they were all interested in learning and growing, and they were all very independent and passionate about their work. And so when we brought them under one roof, I started to see a lot more of that happening day to day in the space, and the entrepreneurs and freelancers working in the space realized they were a lot more creative than they originally thought. And the artists and the designers and the illustrators and painters all realized that they were a lot more entrepreneurial than they realized. And the two working side by side now, I think, provide each other with a sense of balance and accomplishment in a way. They both made each other aware of those sides and are bringing out those strengths in each other, which is really interesting. I think that in terms of the art world, in the studio setting, we're very used to critiquing each other's work, seeing works in progress. And we all understand that, a painting 3 days in is not going to be the final product, and we don't judge that. We offer suggestions and feedback and our own experiences. And I think that's something that entrepreneurs can really take a lesson from and, feel more confident in sharing their ideas in this early stage and accepting that it's not going to be perfect on the first 3 passes. I think that the entrepreneurs and the freelancers and the small businesses that are working within these communities as well could also sort of guide and advise some of the creative folks on how to easily and really without too much change to their lifestyle, generate some more interest and revenue and ways to sort of market and promote themselves or build a brand in ways that the artists are not really thinking of traditionally, so that the story isn't one always of a starving artist, that there could be a thriving artist. And we're really trying to shift that perspective as well within our spaces. So I think there's a lot of crossover, and there are a lot more lessons we're going to see out of this combination over the years.
I feel like if you can diversify the energy in your space and have people with different kinds of dispositions there, that it really brings some liveliness to it. And some artists, especially if those artists can be prolific and can be putting stuff up on the walls and helping out with exhibitions in the space, and we can bring this whole other element of maybe reverence for real stuff on paper, on canvas, as opposed to just purely digital, that I don't know, I just feel like that could really underscore some a stronger sense that the space is not just an office space, but more of a community center and a center of culture.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what it is actually is it's that diversity, and that it doesn't necessarily have to be the artist. It's important to me, and at all the locations I've built, the focus has been that the members are diverse. And that is really what I think creates a vibrant community, because we all have different backgrounds and history, cultures, expertise, experience, and that's sort of what we bring to the table when we come to a co-working community. And so the more diverse it is, the more experience we have, the greater our hive mind sort of becomes. And I think that's really what gives us that power in that way, that we feel inspired by each other and we can support each other with the experience we have.
I love it. So I guess to that end, I'm wondering, where do you think this is going? Where do you want to see it go? What's your vision? What's your dream? What's your hope? Maybe even a little bit about what's your fear, in terms of where this can go and what you'd like to see happen.
Well, I think we're on track to see what we've been hoping for. And for a long time, we've been hoping that co-working isn't a concept we have to explain to people. And there's still a ways to go, but we're getting there, and people understand what this movement is all about. My fear, though, is that as co-working becomes mainstream, a lot of people are getting involved in the industry with the thought that this is a way to sort of market a new product or service, or that this is a way to tap into some real estate gains, or it's just an investment to make because they see the sheer number of independent contractors that will be coming online in the next few years. And I feel like we're going to be spending the next decade sort of working towards reminding people about authentic co-working and what genuine co-working is, and how important building community is amongst sort of all of this noise that's about to come online. I think I'm really excited for this shift, because it means that there will be more options and more space and a larger variety and diversity of environments for people to join. And so hopefully they'll all find something that works really well for them. But I do fear that a lot of people will join a space that may not really get it and have a bad experience with co-working before they actually get to a genuine one. So I think my hope for the future is that people who haven't tried it will try a few spaces before they make up their mind about it.
That's a good point. I think one of the things that the more optimistic among us might say is that if someone goes to a co-working space and has a less than flattering experience, that person would recognize the fact and be willing to go and look for something better and find it in a better co-working community. But my concern, and I think what we see happening, is that there are people who stick around in less than great co-working communities because they just don't know any better. I feel like it's like me growing up drinking like Coke, or like drinking bad beer because I've never drank good beer, or something. It's like you don't know how bad Budweiser is until you've drank some awesome craft beer. You might just never even bother to try it until somebody shows it to you, And so I feel like there's a lot of people who might just end up drinking Budweiser for a long time out there, or just not. That's a really bad analogy. I'm sorry, but I think it kind of works. But the same with, or just not get into it in the first place. One of the things we heard at GCUC in Los Angeles in May was that co-working is at 2% market penetration. And I don't think that means that the other 98 are super excited to sign up for a co-working space right now. I think a lot of them are on the sidelines, not finding a really compelling reason to get into this in the first place, because all they're seeing are less compelling sort of options. And so I guess what I'm getting at is, what do you think it's going to take to really access that other 98% of the people who are out there? And it sounds like it's not, just trying to rent fancy looking office space to people, but it's something a little bit more meaningful and maybe a little bit less obvious. What do you think that's going to take?
I think it's really going to come from an effort from the co-working industry itself to educate people about something new, not just what co-working is, but what it could be. And I feel like we've spent the first decade or so of the movement really explaining and building and sort of laying the groundwork and the foundation for this movement. But now it's time to really show off what the potential and all the opportunities could be. I think if collectively as the industry, we make that a focus and we work together to get the word out there about how every space is unique and how important it is to really find the right fit. That's a service for everyone. And I think one way that we can do this is through our local co-working collectives. And I've really been lucky to have that experience in all the cities I'm working in the collective, Co-working Toronto Collective, the Seattle Collaborative Space Alliance, a newly forming group in Vancouver. Everyone is really supportive of each other. And for example, if someone comes for a tour in the Foundery buildings in Toronto, at the end of the tour, they're going to be pointed in the direction of the collective and made aware that there are, more than 20 other spaces in our city. But we all know each other and support each other and like each other. And we refer members to each other and we try and help each other out. So to sort of break down the barrier for the member, to let them know it's okay to try other spaces, to talk to us about other spaces, let us know what they like and don't like, and we can point them in the right direction. Because to me, it's most important that those people get connected with the spaces that are right for them, so that they have that type of an experience. And I always feel like if you're in the right space, the potential is life-changing. And so it's really important for me to match people up to the right spaces. And I feel like there are a lot of owner-operators in co-working that feel the same way, that they would rather have those people find the spaces that are inspiring and empowering for them than to have someone who's not quite the right fit sitting in your space.
Well, yeah, because we still have to grow the industry, right? We still have to grow the market. So if we're really at 2% of what's possible right now, then the name of the game is education and getting people to understand why they should even bother to do this in the first place. And whether they go to your competitor or to the co-working space down the block or yours is less important than us just rising the tide and getting more people co-working to begin with, right? And I can't help but think of the got milk analogy, right? That in the US and I don't know if they did they do got milk in Canada? Do you know?
Absolutely. Okay. I'm aware of it for sure.
Yeah. So there's, different companies that produce milk all over the place, but they realize that instead of all of them just trying to advertise their own version of milk, that let's just get people drinking milk, right? Let's pool our resources and get people to understand why milk itself is awesome, and let's just get as many people drinking milk as possible, and then we all will benefit. And it seems obvious that the same kind of logic applies in the realm of co-working. The fact that these local alliances are coming up is, of course, very relevant, and we're also seeing, national associations and groups like that emerging. And so maybe we can focus on that a little bit at GCUC Canada. Get the people who are running alliances to speak and to share with folks who might be interested in starting ones, and for us to talk about maybe coordinating our efforts in even more substantial capacities.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really important that we be working together to achieve this type of a goal for the industry. And we are seeing progress in the cities that have those alliances and where they're working together. I feel like the community is stronger and more vibrant and much more sustainable model overall. I think that a lot of people are also afraid of sort of these bigger players coming on the scene, and it could be different provider in different parts of the world, but there's always sort of, a larger entity that people are a little bit worried about as it opens up in their city, and they're worried about saturation of the market. And we've seen this, and you were just speaking about the penetration rate. It's not anywhere close to anything to be afraid of. And what we're seeing is as sort of these larger entities open up. Some of them have larger budgets for their advertising, and it's the best thing to happen to co-working for that city, because people who wouldn't otherwise be exposed to it are hearing about it or considering the concept, and then just start doing their homework and looking at the spaces that are out there. So I would suggest that we shouldn't be afraid of these new players in the market, and instead we should all work together to get the word out there and really focus on what makes us unique in the market.
I agree. I think if there's a saturation happening, it's probably happening within a very narrowly defined segment of, sort of co-working as we've known it, or even co-working specifically as an office rental sort of a segment. But there's still so much opportunity. So, I would hate for somebody out there who wants to really get involved in this to not do so simply because they're concerned that they're going to get muscled out. I think you have to be careful about that, but at the same time, there's still so much opportunity, and you just have to focus on being awesome.
No, I agree. And I would also suggest that someone who is just starting out and thinking of opening a community or a space of their own should reach out to the other owner-operators in that city. So many people have reached out to us over the years, and we've helped, hundreds of other spaces open. And I think a lot of people are sort of afraid of reaching out to the quote-unquote competitor, when really, if you think about it, people who are generally running these spaces believe in the co-working model. They believe in collaboration and supporting each other and sort of doing our own things, but together. And so that help is there, whereas it wasn't 10 years ago. So that's a resource that new owner-operators have now, and I think should really be taking advantage of.
So I want to transition, because we're a little short on time, to GCUC Canada. You're organizing the conference. It's in Montreal this October. Some of the folks who are listening to this might be considering coming. It's a non-trivial investment to fly to Montreal, to book the hotel, to pay for that ticket, come into that space. But you and I know, as junkies for co-working conferences, just how incredible it can be. So I'm wondering if we're talking to the folks out there who are listening to this, thinking about making that big investment, what do you hope will happen at this GCUC Canada conference? What do you hope that you'll see happening that the folks who are listening to this might help to make a reality by showing up and bringing their passion with them?
Yeah, so I really feel like a co-working conference is an incredible meeting of the minds. And I don't say this as a producer. I do say this as a lover of all co-working conferences. And I have gone to as many as I can possibly fit in for this very reason. But I always leave an event like this completely inspired. I feel like the impact is magnified by being together in a room with that many other people who are like-minded and as passionate about the work they do as I am, even if we're doing it in different ways and in different places around the world. And I feel like every time we meet, no matter where it is in the world, something magical happens in that room. And in our own ways, we all light up, and we take that back with us to our communities. We take what we've learned, and we take the connections that we've made and the networks we've built, and even that just sort of boost we've gotten from seeing each other and really celebrating each other back to our own communities. And then that impact trickles out. It reaches all of our members. It reaches the other spaces that we share these ideas with and start working with in our own cities. And so I always see it as sort of a meeting point, but then it's just the beginning. And so much more happens after that conference. And so it's, again, in the same way as co-working, not necessarily about the space or the place or the event. It's all the people that show up and the connections you make that really count and have that impact. And so everyone who joins and participates gets to decide what that impact might be. And I get thrilled just thinking about what it could be this year in Montreal. It's going to be such an exciting event, and we've got people coming from all over the world. Montreal is an incredible city. For those who haven't been, first of all, it's a real gem within Canada. And if you've never been to Canada before, it's definitely a city worth noting. It's really special, and it's sort of like a little taste of Europe as well. So even though I've been many times, I'm already counting the days until I get to go back to magical Montreal.
I tell people it's the best way to experience Europe if you don't want to cross an ocean. You could really, it's like a little bit of France, which is so nice. But this actually isn't even the next Juicy conference that you will be attending. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on flying out to participate in Juicy China next month.
I am so excited for Juicy China. I'll be heading to Beijing for the first time. Really excited to meet co-working enthusiasts, and on a scale that I've never seen a Juicy conference before. Juicy China gets hundreds and hundreds of attendees, and I can only imagine that the experience is magnified with that many more people, that many more ideas, and all that experience and expertise in one space. I'm really excited about seeing different spaces in Beijing and how things are done. And I'm really nervous to get up on stage in front of potentially thousands of people. But the idea of meeting that many more co-working space owner-operators and enthusiasts is really exciting to me.
Getting chills. I'm so excited. and it's really amazing, when we think about where this is going, to think that as fast as co-working has grown, as many people are participating in it already and aware of it, that when you look in other countries, when you look in other languages, for everything that we've been talking about, so much of what we've been talking about with co-working, there's just so much more growing for it to do. You look at a nation like China. We've been seeing in India too. India's growing like crazy. There's whole regions of the world where co-working is really just starting to break through in an exciting way. And I know when I talked to Liz about China, she just the numbers she talks to me about with the scale of what's happening there, everything is bigger and faster and just accelerated. And so I think the revolution is just going to keep getting bigger and more exciting, and I'm real excited to see where it goes from here.
It's really incredible. It blows my mind to think about it, and I've actually been trying not to think about it lately because it's slightly overwhelming to think of how quickly things are moving in China, but also how amazing it must be to experience that. And it's just sort of a magnified version of what we've been experiencing in the industry here. So that's what really interests me the most, is to have a little taste of that. I'm not sure at this point if it's going to be something that scares me or thrills me in a positive way, but we'll see when I get there, I suppose. I'm really most excited about meeting the people.
Well, that always seems to be what it comes back to, whether it's a conference or being a part of a co-working space. Ashley, it's so awesome to be able to have a conversation with you that we get to record. I know you and I could talk for hours about this stuff, but I'm glad that we were able to at least capture a little bit of it. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me. Thank you for all the work that you do. And I'm excited to see you in Montreal for Juicy Canada in October 5th to 7th.
It's going to be great. Thanks for the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley.
Take care.
Thanks again for joining us here at Juicy Radio. Again, if you want to grab tickets for the Juicy Canada Conference, you can find out more about that at canada.juicy.co. And if you're feeling bold and want to find out about Juicy China as well, just head to juicy.co and you can find links to all of the upcoming Juicy conferences there. I hope this has been an enjoyable experience for you. It's been a bit since we've recorded the last conversation, and so I'm excited to get some more episodes going. This is always a really exciting thing for me to do, and I'd love to hear from you. So if you have thoughts on this episode or Juicy Radio in general or co-working in general or just how you want to make the world a better place, shoot me an email. My email is tony@nwc.co, and you can find me at TonyBeGood on Twitter. So that's all for this episode of Juicy Radio. In the meantime, keep making the world a better place for everyone around you and keep being awesome.